me add PAA real
Also,
quick.
thanks everyone who has just been jumping on. Right now, we're talking with Alejandria, who's coordinator of No False Solutions Coalition, and she was talking to us about how No False Solutions have been showing up in the last legislative session, and we're also joined by Reyes from Global Action Alliance.
Hey everybody, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, all right, sweet. We can hear you. Do you want to quickly, or not quickly, but introduce yourself, and then we can go to some questions? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Reyes Devore. I'm from the Pueblo of Jemez. I am the program director with Pueblo Action Alliance. I've been with the organization since its beginning in 2016. My hat is a little bit different within the organization, and I've been more of a support role with all the work here with the No False Solution. So Julia couldn't be here tonight, but I'm here to support this conversation as best as I can. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for jumping on with us. Want to start with asking Reyes a couple of questions. Firstly, just wanting you to, tell us about yourself and how you got involved in climate work, and also how you learned about fossil fuels. Yeah, so before we got into climate work, I mean, EJ work and climate work, they like hand in hand. But a little bit of background story with PAA, like we started when the Waters Life movement was happening, when our Lakota relatives were fighting against DAPL. And then we brought that same fight here because we wanted to begin to pay attention to the climate injustices that were happening here in the Southwest and our own homelands. And that's when we began to pay attention to protecting the greater Chaco region against oil and gas industries, and really diving deep into educating our communities on resource extraction and how that's a form of extractive colonialism. And so fast forward, years later, we got invited, Julia, our ED, who also leads our climate justice work, her and I got invited to a gathering with Indigenous Environmental Network, where they brought us to learn about carbon markets and carbon market training. And so that's where we began to first hear about how these industries are extracting in this different form. And we were already hearing then that people were corporate companies were looking at New Mexico as a way to bring in those markets, and here we are. And so my role as program director has been to support the climate justice work and ensuring that community is educated and that there's that connection in maintaining grassroots level of bottom-up organizing. And so my role has been to continuously support like the carbon conferences and educational opportunities that we have, and then also supporting now what exists is the No False Solutions Coalition, which has come from frontline communities, from Indigenous peoples, from communities of color who are being directly impacted by this work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the work that you do. So tonight we're talking about false solutions and how they've been, showing up in our, in our organizing work and in like the threats to our, to Mother Earth and to our climate. So I'm wondering if you could give us like, how would you define a false solution?
I think false solutions, and the way that I would put it, if I were to also explain it to like my son or a relative, and that's how I've always tried to really think about it in that way, right? False solutions are basically anything that an extractive company or a corporate company is coming in and making something look clean and pretty on this little plate, like this platter, right? And so that's how carbon markets have been made to look clean, right? So false solutions are definitely just this demise that resource extraction companies are using to make it look like we're leaning towards sustainable solutions to combat climate work. Ale, I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit more too, but I feel like, I don't know, in the context, in the way that I try to always understand climate work and educate our communities, like I always try to figure out like how can we make sure that we are breaking it down for our community too. So Fall Solutions is like basically letting our relatives know that like what's the real truth behind what is being promoted here.
Yeah, thank you for that definition. I think especially, with a lot of youth viewers that we have, explaining it in that way, definitely I think, as youth myself kind of helps me grasp onto the concept a little better. So yeah, I really appreciate that answer. Also, Reyes, another question for you. I'm wondering if you can give a recap on some of the fall solutions that we had to fight this session, and kind of like talking about like the effects, healing, and other social justice issues that were presented this past session.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna actually defer to Ale about the actual bill numbers because I don't want to misinform anybody. But basically, it like if I can give my perspective, it's like this legislative session, we were basically fighting the same fight that we were doing last session. It was a really big repeat. And I think what really happens a lot of the time is that our our perspectives of Indigenous people as like younger organizations were like undermined. And they really like don't look at us as like as like experts, as like people they want to call other people. And so for us, I think that the No False Solutions Coalition came on really strong. And I will say, like, I'm very proud of all the efforts that came about from fighting against this session. That included hydrogen, included carbon markets, it included even fighting nuclear. So there are a lot of different various fights when it came to this session too. But I'll defer to Ale to speak more on the specific names of all the House bills that we were fighting against.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I mean, we're fighting the clean fuel standard, which is essentially, the same but a different iteration of the Clean Fuel Standard Act that was introduced last year. A different iteration of the Clean Futures Act, which we felt like, while it was a great effort, it just didn't get us there. And by our tenets and our points of unity, it's really like this is a false solution, because if it is just about giving the governor a win or political officials a win, we don't have enough time for that. And that is the issue of like many of the bills that were introduced this session, is that they do not begin to address what we need to happen, really, as far as climate justice and climate action now here in New Mexico and for the regions and the greater our indigenous partners in the global south and other folks, like other land-based folks that we are really accountable to.
Yeah, and something that both you and Reyes touched on is that it kind of feels like we're, fighting the same fights every session and, outside of session two. So I'm wondering if there are any like particular obstacles that you've noticed that like keep showing up. And related to that, if there are any tactics that you've noticed have helped in addressing them. And I guess whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start, and then Ali, I'll pass it off to you. I'm gonna be like quite frank and honest here that I think one of the obstacles and the like the unfortunate things that we're seeing here, especially in climate work, is that when I said earlier that we're often being undermined, who I was speaking to was Big Greens, a lot of other organizations that have manpower that we don't have as younger organizations that are like still in its beginning stages. And I really wish that big greens and other organizations that have bigger capacity and manpower would really support and listen to the grassroots communities that are directly impacted. Because imagine if we were to lead, if they were to follow and we were to lead in that way, like just imagine the possibilities that could happen, the shifts that could happen, the healthier communities that we could have. Because last year that happened and this year it happened again, and it's just really unfortunate that that remains as an obstacle here. And I think that it's a big one that is kind of like the elephant in the room, but not. And I think that it's really important that if we're doing organizing, that we be honest with ourselves and really look at what accountability measures that we need to have in order to move towards like true justice in climate work.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Reyes. And just to add on, I feel like a tactic that we together, everybody here in the Zoom circle, that I think recognizes the power of direct action that has a narrative, a very concrete narrative about addressing what is happening in New Mexico. Because the bill HB6 that we were all coming out against, because one, it held hostage the Just Transition Office, which was an attempt to, help our workers, right? But then holding it hostage with the false solutions that that the government wanted to, the governor wanted to have, was that action that we held on Climate Justice Day. And I think that we really took the narrative back about what this is, because it's not just about the extinction of crops like Chile. It's not just about that. It is about the erasure of culture. It is about the erasure of us as people, as land-based people, as indigenous groups, and that do not have, like Reyes mentioned, the resources. We are a grassroots effort, and unfortunately, we represent many of our community members that can't access the capital. And so I think that the rise in escalation tactics is something that is needed, and continuing to hold the line and draw the line in the sand about these things, because really what we're talking about is we need a new system of being, a new system of economics. We cannot allow capitalism to drive what we're doing, because it's not working.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your answers. I'm hearing, indigenous erasure, I'm hearing bottom up organizing, I'm hearing, many different things that definitely, hold that up. So I'm wondering, what is your hope in relation to these things, for our coalition's work in future legislative
Yeah, I'll
sessions?
start this time. I think that, the idea of a climate leadership act, of us as young groups, as groups that represent, historically unrepresented communities, because while it really does suck to engage in the legislature, I think that we do have a duty for those that, of us that can understand that language and have the tools and the access, that we carry everybody, our not just our community members, but our history and our families and everything that we are into the space. And so I think a real climate leadership act is something that we have thrown around, and I really hope that we continue that. I hope that we continue to stay on a lot of these issues in the interim, because what we saw last year was, although all of the EJ movement in New Mexico was against hydrogen, we still saw that there was an executive order written on hydrogen. And so keeping us on our toes, continuing these sorts of events like the IG Lives, and using these different communications tools to inform and bring people along, so that we can continue to build a movement in the interim, so that next session we can do a policy, but it is informed by all these conversations that we're having with so many people. So that's what I see, like, on the policy. And I don't know, Reyes, if you think of even long-term movement building, to add to that.
I'll just echo what you already said, because the community education is extremely important. It has to be accessible and it has to be intergenerational. Like, that's the only way that we're going to be able to mobilize and build capacity. And it's also important to continuously take upon action in this way, because education is power. But then also, when you give people that education, they feel that they also have a place in acting against and protecting their communities too. So there's a couple things that go hand in hand, right? And so um, my hope for the coalition, and my role to support too, is to ensure that our youth are getting educated too, because they're like our next leaders, and we are leading this work too. But we need to make sure that we're actively providing space for them to share their perspectives, because they shouldn't, well, one, it's not fair to them what's being handed to them, what they're already growing up in. But we should be giving them the education and the tools and the resources, and for them to show up and participate in action, whether that's direct action, whether that's in public comment, whether that's in civic action. So all of those pieces are extremely important. And as Ale said, sometimes it feels like we just keep hitting a wall when we participate in legislative sessions, or when we're participating in this type of civic action. But PAA, we recognize that, it's our right and our responsibility to be out here actively participating in action in these various capacities, because, unfortunately, that's just like the current state that we're in. But also actively, disrupting when and where we can, and providing our community members the preparation that they need to show up in their fullest, like, empowered self, right? I feel like that's the goal of, or like one of the goals, or how I could see like supporting the coalition too.
Yeah, thank you. And that was kind of perfect segue to our last question, because you both uplifted some, I think, really, be like a beautiful path that we were hoping to take, both like policy wise and like community building, community education. And so our last question to you both is, how can others get involved with No Fall Solutions, either in our New Mexico Coalition or in other spaces? Whoever wants to start, I don't know.
Yeah, well, because there's two pieces, I think I'll plug in the actual communications we have for the coalition, and then let you three put the plug in for your individual organizations. But our coalition does have a website up, has some resources. We're continuing to build onto the website, and have a place where folks can sign on to agreeing with our points of unity, which will put us in contact so we can start building our listserv that we hope to have real active. So our website is just nofallsolutions.com. I can throw that in the chat after I wrap up. But we do have one outlet for social media. It's Twitter, but that was basically for the purposes to try to keep up with the legislative session. That handle is NM, as in New Mexico _NFS, like No False Solutions. So those are two ways to get in touch specifically with New Mexico No False Solutions. But I do encourage any of the folks who are on that are unfamiliar with any of the organizations that are part of our coalition to follow them, and keeping a lookout for more events. I think we may possibly have an Earth Day event, and that we would put through the Yucca and Pueblo Action Alliance social media channels via IG and Facebook. Yeah, that's all I have for the coalition part.
And then Reyes, is there anything you wanna plug?
Well, if you're not already following everybody's pages here that are part of the coalition, Yucca, Pueblo Action Alliance, I guess, obviously echoing what Alejandria is saying too, but really, like, I think just taking the time to educate yourself too. Like really looking at the op-eds that are being uploaded or looking at the posts that are being created and amplifying it by sharing it out, sharing it as much as you can. You know, I think we often can dismiss the importance of just having conversations with our family or friends or community members. And I know that it can be challenging sometimes to talk about these things because it can be so complex. But it's important to, you know, figure out how we can also be community members that are actively educating ourselves, but then also engaging in conversations on the daily with our community members and our family and our friends, because that's where community is at, right? And that's like how we can really maintain those grassroots values of education instead of being in spaces where we feel intimidated, you know, when we're trying to join or be active in any type of climate work.
Yeah, and then, you know, just a real quick plug for Hoodwinked in the Hot House. That's a resource that I always use. It's a pamphlet that details all the fall solutions that we named tonight. You can find a PDF. I think they have an audiobook now of Hoodwinked in the Hot House that you can check out on climatefallsolutions.org. I put that in the chat. And it's in multiple languages. It's in English, it's in Spanish, it's in Portuguese, Arabic, it's in French. Maybe one day we'll have it in Navajo. I mean, there's a whole collective working behind that, because there really is, and I want to just iterate, you know, there is a national and international movement against what we're seeing, which is essentially the takeover of technologies, and the fossil fuel companies trying to manipulate our market and our governments. And so Hoodwinked in the Hot House is a great collective as well as a great resource that I would plug just outside of our coalition and member groups.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. And also, really quick, I guess I'll plug some Yucca things. We're going to be doing a couple more of these lives. Actually, Zeph might know more. So if I say anything wrong, please correct me. But we'll be having a couple more of these lives, one of which will be specifically about like recruitment, and if there's any, you know, like young people based in New Mexico who are interested in learning more or seeing how they want to get involved. I forget the exact day, but like we, you know, we'll be making some posts on our Instagram that will, you know, give you some more of the details of like how to join, what joining Yucca means, and just like some more information if you guys are curious. And yeah, we'd really love to have you. Yeah, I'll pass it to Zeph if you have anything.
I'm almost
Yeah, definitely. So wanting to remind you all that if you were trying to attend the live yesterday with Chiliyazi, we are going to be postponing that and rescheduling that. So keep an eye out for, you know, another post telling you when that live will be. And then also wanting to let you all know that we're having an upcoming member meeting on Monday, April 17th at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom. And I'm going to drop a link. If you go to yuccanm.org/member, it will take you to a registration page to sign up for this member meeting. So join Yucca. You know, we all hope to see you soon. And we'll see you back on live again next week. And thank you again to Reyes and Ale for joining us on this live tonight. Really, really appreciate you and all your answers and knowledge and just being in
Thank
this
you
space
all
with
for
you.
what you do in holding this space. It's great to have this conversation.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll see y'all later.
I can't do it.